What's up? Welcome back to the FNL Health channel. This is FNL Fridays and I am Teresa. I'm here to teach you about all things fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle. Today we're talking about how my eating disorders affected my relationship with my fiance. As you may or may not know, if you've watched some of my previous videos, I got really into bodybuilding in 2012, and during that time, unfortunately, I developed multiple eating disorders, primarily orthorexia, which is basically an obsession with eating clean. So I was afraid of everything processed, anything sweet, basically anything that tasted good. I also occasionally had episodes of bulimia. So that is when you throw up after you eat, regardless of the amount. So generally that would be if I, went to a buffet or I just completely stuffed myself way too much. And that was how I would make myself feel better and feel less guilty about the amount of food that I ate. But aside from the orthorexia, the biggest thing that I struggled with, which actually lasted the longest, was binge eating disorder. And again, if you're not familiar with binge eating disorder, that's when you pretty much eat a ton of food very quickly and you feel completely out of control, that you can't stop yourself even though you're probably internally yelling at yourself while you're doing it. It's a really terrible feeling. For anybody who has experienced it, you might know that it's so hard, because while you're stuffing your face and you're really enjoying, taste-wise, you're really enjoying the food that you're eating, you're also already upset at yourself because you know that right after you finish eating, you're going to feel like shit, maybe physically, but definitely mentally, because you broke your diet or just because you binged, and that's not a healthy eating habit if that's not apparent. Generally, when you binge, it's usually on tasty foods, so snack foods, candy, cookies, chips, things that taste really good, a lot of times high fat or high carb, high sugar content. And that a lot of times comes from dieting and deprivation. So most of us, when we diet, it's cutting back on fat or cutting back on sugars or cutting back on processed foods. So when you get to the point of binge eating disorder, it's usually because you have been so restrictive. And it doesn't even have to be for a long time. You could be for a week and then binge. It's a lot of us actually do it probably without recognizing it, but I would say if you're doing this all the time, that's when you might have an issue. And if you do feel like that is you, please reach out to someone for help. If you want to reach out to me, please do. There are plenty of people out there, though, that specialize in eating disorder recovery and binge eating. So if you feel like you are constantly stuffing yourself to the point of feeling sick and then immediately feeling terrible about yourself afterwards, and you're restricting a lot, and then as soon as you have one thing, you can't stop yourself, if any of that sounds familiar and that's happening like regularly to you, definitely reach out to somebody, because I know how hard that can be and I know how terrible it is. And you can stop. You can get out of it. I dealt with it for over 4 years. I did that. And thank God I finally was able to break that cycle, because it was the most challenging time in my life, in regards to how I felt about myself and my personal feelings about myself and my confidence and who I was as a person. And it was the lowest I ever was, unfortunately. But going through that has brought me to where I am, and it's motivated me to help other women. And of course, I'm sure there's men out there that suffer with it too, but I do believe this is a much more prevalent problem with women. So again, if you are struggling with binge eating disorder, or you think you might be, please reach out to me or a professional, because there is help. That being said, I want to tell a little bit about my story and how my eating disorders affected my relationship. At the time that I would say that, ultimately that I started to develop these eating disorders, I had been with my boyfriend for probably a year and a half. So, we had been together for a decent amount of time, and we were living together. So obviously we spent evenings together and we ate dinner together and we, shopped together. And so all of that was very intertwined. To be honest, I don't even really remember exactly how it started, but I know that at the height of my eating disorders, there were a ton of really awful things that were going on with my habits and in regards to my relationship, and also how our relationship suffered because of what was going on with me. One of the biggest things that was going on is I was hiding the food that I was eating, not literally hiding it, but I was hiding the fact that I was eating and what I was eating. So probably almost every day before my boyfriend would get home, I would raid the kitchen because I didn't want him to see me eating things that I shouldn't be. And let me preface this by saying he is extremely supportive of me and whatever goals I have. So at the time, I was, in the very beginning, I was prepping for a bodybuilding competition, and I was trying to lose body fat, put on muscle, eat really well, eat really clean, and stick to my diet, essentially. And he was super supportive. It was never pushy. It was never like judgmental, but he was trying to support me, and that's what he thought I needed. He wanted to encourage me to eat well and stay on track. So he did. And it was me trying to hide the fact that I felt like I was letting him down. So if he saw me eating cookies, then I would feel like he would see that and be let down that I wasn't staying on track, and he would be disappointed in me. And ultimately it got to a point where I was so terrified of what he would think of me and what he did think of me, because I for so many years I was dealing with binge eating, and he ultimately did see that. It wasn't a secret after a while, but it got to the point where I thought he might leave me, and that's really depressing because this was the person I thought I was going to marry and that I am going to marry. So it worked out. But that was a really awful feeling to feel like my relationship with my future husband was actually in jeopardy because of the food I was eating. And it sounds kind of crazy to say that out loud now, but that's really what it was. I felt like he would see me as a failure, and he would see me as someone who didn't see things through, somebody that couldn't just tough it out, and just keep pushing through the challenging times. But what I don't think he fully comprehended for a long time was the mental anguish that I was in. I think in the beginning he thought that I just wasn't trying hard enough. For a lot of men, dieting, again, if that's what you want to call it, is not as challenging as it is for women, because again, we have different hormones, we get our periods, we a lot of times we eat for stress, and it's a lot different for women, I think, because I do feel that women tend to be more of emotional eaters, and we are more affected by our hormones than men are. So for him, it was like, just don't eat cookies for a couple months. Like, no big deal. What's the problem? But for me, it was just this black and white, all or nothing. Can't have a single cookie, can't touch anything, can't have chocolate, nothing sweet. And so anyway, that was a really long roundabout point. But one of the biggest things was the fact that I was hiding foods that I ate from him. So before he would come home, I would raid the kitchen and I would binge. I remember explicitly standing in the kitchen, keeping my eye on the front door, because as soon as I saw his silhouette coming up to the front door, I would really quickly put everything back and get out of the kitchen, because I didn't want him to know that I was in the kitchen, because if he knew I was in the kitchen, he would know I was eating and probably not eating what I was supposed to. So that was one of the biggest things, and that was, almost daily. Aside from that, which didn't necessarily affect him very much because he didn't know about it, there was the issue of our relationship. My confidence, oddly enough, the more fit I became, the more I lost body fat, the better I looked, the lower my self-esteem was, and it was totally a mind fuck. And I think this happens to a lot of women, especially in the bodybuilding industry. I'm sure not everybody, but I've seen this a lot, is that as we become leaner and more fit, it almost reinforces the idea that like we're still not there yet, which leads to this feeling of like still not good enough, right? So when you are consistently flooded with thoughts of, okay, I'm improving, but I'm still not there yet. It's not where I need to be. I'm going to be on stage. People are going to be judging me. And this is talking about bodybuilding, but that's also like real life, right? The hypothetical stage that we're on, right? And other people are judging us. So whether you're doing it for bodybuilding or just real life, there's this constant feeling of I'm being judged or I'm going to be judged, and what I look like matters. And do I look good enough for somebody else to approve of me? And this was the mentality that I had. So as I got in better and better shape, I kept feeling like, okay, well, yeah, I'm seeing changes. That's great. But I'm still not there yet. I'm not gonna look good up on stage next to all these other women that look phenomenal and, are super lean and you can see all their muscles, and I'm not gonna win. I'm not even gonna place. And unfortunately, that led to me being extremely insecure. And every time someone would make a comment about my body of like, wow, you look great, or you're losing weight, it was like crack. Like I was like, oh yes, like that's all I want. I just want people to tell me I look good. But it also reinforced my belief that I didn't look good enough, if that makes any sense. So all I wanted was for people to tell me I looked good, and it felt like very good, of course, for people to notice it, but it was very fleeting. It was a very quick, it felt good, and now I'm insecure again. With my relationship, and some of you may know my fiance, some of you don't, but he's very fit. He looks wonderful, and he takes his health very seriously, and he's always been that way. Since I've met him, he's been extremely fit and in great shape, and, he has his own challenges, but visually, he looks great. So that was another added challenge to me, where I felt like, oh, well, I want to be the equal half of this fit couple, and I felt like I wasn't. Like I felt like, oh, well, he looks perfect and I don't, and that's hard for me because, what must he think of me if he's so good looking and so fit, and then he's got this girlfriend over here that's, in my eyes, I felt like I was fat. I wasn't what he would want. And again, this was in my head. He never said this to me, but these are the stories that I started telling myself, of like, oh, well, he's super fit, and he's going to want to be with a woman who's at his level, and that's not me. That affected us very strongly. Obviously, intimacy-wise, I was super uncomfortable. I didn't feel confident. I didn't want him to see me naked, and when he did, it was always cover my tummy and suck it in, and you know what I mean? It was very not natural and not relaxed, not confident, that's for sure. So that definitely affected us because he could tell, he could tell that I wasn't comfortable and I wasn't confident because I wasn't exuding that at all. A lot of times when our confidence is super low, we draw even more attention to that by talking about our shortcomings and by talking about our flaws, because we're not confident in ourselves. For example, a lot of times with women, it's always like, oh, but all this fat here, oh, my belly, we draw attention to the things that we're insecure about. And in a relationship, when you want your spouse or whoever to see you as confident, constantly drawing attention to what you're not confident about is probably not the best way to go about it. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of us do. Then there was the totally other side of things, where emotionally our relationship was so strained because, again, he was trying to be super supportive, whether that meant I'm not dieting or I am dieting. He just went with it. It was like, okay, you don't want to do that anymore. Like, that's fine. That's your choice. Like, whatever you want to do. And then I said, no, okay, I need you to help me. And we can't go out to eat, and don't let me have cookies. And if you see me trying to, buy this thing, don't let me do it. And then he'd say, okay, like, I'll be supportive in that way, whatever you want. But no matter what I did, I was still basically trapped in this cycle. I never fully broke out of it for 4 years. So I would go back and forth, but it was never good enough. It was either I'm dieting and I hate this because it's hard and I'm miserable, or I'm not dieting and I'm terrified that I'm going to gain all this weight really quickly, and I don't feel confident about myself, so I have to diet, because if I'm not thin, then I'm not going to love myself and I'm not going to be confident. So I went just back and forth, and I'm talking like probably weekly, monthly. It was like, okay, I'm doing it. No, I'm not. I'm miserable, but I need to, but I hate this, but I'm going to get fat, but I hate my life. And I'm not even kidding when I say that. I hated my life. I was miserable. And most people probably didn't see that, but Joe definitely did. He saw it, every single day. And part of that was that I would have breakdowns at least once a week, if not more. And they would be about a multitude of things. Sometimes it would be I binged and then I would just cry all night, and because I was so ashamed and I felt like a failure and I hated myself and I felt like I couldn't do it and I wasn't good enough to just do it, right? To just lose those 5 pounds or 10 pounds, whatever it was. Other times it would be me crying just because I felt trapped and I didn't know what to do. And this went on for years, and that can take a huge toll on a relationship when you have one person that is internally going through an enormous struggle that feels trapped. And I think that was the hardest part, is I really felt trapped. I felt like there was no good way out of the situation I was in. It was, I either continue, keep my fit body, and which I thought I wanted and made me feel good, and I kept that, but I would have to diet the rest of my life, which I knew I couldn't handle. Or the alternative, which at the time, what I thought was, stop dieting completely. I'm definitely going to gain a bunch of weight and be completely not confident because I had gained weight, and the whole point was I was trying to lose weight to feel better about my body. So it truly felt like there was no winning, there was no escaping, there was no good solution. I love him so much for sticking with me through those years, because I know that must have been really difficult, and perhaps it was really annoying. I don't know. He never said that to me, but I do remember apologizing a lot for dragging him back and forth with me for that long, of always crying about the same thing, of always trying to diet and stopping, and talking about the same issues all the time, because it was the same issue over and over. Maybe it was slightly different, or what happened that day was different than the day before, but the overall issue was the same. And I remember feeling terrible that I was dragging him along for the ride, and that was another reason that our relationship was strained, and that was another reason I thought he would leave me, because who wants to be with someone that's miserable but isn't making change? If you're with someone who's trying to better their situation, that seems a lot more tolerable than someone who's miserable but isn't doing anything about it, or feels like they can't do anything about it. I don't know if this is something that you connect with, but I do know that a ton of women out there have similar issues to mine in the past, and that their relationships are deeply affected by the struggles physically and nutritionally and mentally that they're going through with themselves. So I wanted to just be transparent and put what I went through out there, because I think a lot of people will probably connect to some of those things. And moral of the story, I want you to know, if you haven't figured it out yet, that there is a way out of that situation, and there are things that you can do. And your relationship with yourself, first and foremost, will become so much better. But your relationship with those around you, especially the people close to you, because they're the ones that see it, right? They're the ones that are along for the ride, whether they want to be or not. And there is a way that you can positively move through if you are in that situation right now. And it is not necessarily easy. It can be very scary, but I can't even tell you the day that I met with somebody when I first started my recovery, the first day that I met with this woman, I felt like just a ton of bricks just lifted off of me. I felt hope for the first time in years, because I had no hope up until that point. I just thought, I'm fucked and this is my life, because there's no way for me to move either way positively here. I lose. Either way I go, I'm going to lose something. Being on the other side of it now, I know how scary it is. I know how hard and depressing and stressful and just all-consuming eating disorders can be, and that they have the potential to affect and ruin relationships. I know that because I was there. I didn't even mention other relationships with my friends or my family. All of those suffered as well, whether they knew it or not. I knew it because I knew I was showing up as someone who I am not. The way that I acted around those people, the things that I did, my stresses, the fact that I was always on edge, all of that affected my relationships. But I wanted to specifically talk about the person that I am closest to, that I live with, that I spend my life with, because that was, for me, the most important relationship at that time. And I just want to let you know that, if you are dealing with any of those sorts of things, that there is always a way that you can move forward. If you have any questions, please comment below if this is something that you connect with. If you have questions, if you moved through this as well and you want to share your experience with other people. It's a really hard thing, and I don't think it's talked about very much. And I think it's becoming more public, and people are starting to share their stories, especially about how their relationships were affected with their own issues, eating disorders specifically. But I would love to know if you got anything from this, if you have any questions, and of course I want to be a resource here for you too. So if you would like some of the resources that I used personally, and just to put it in a nutshell, I kind of went towards intuitive eating. That's how I ultimately got out of my eating disorder. So if you're not familiar with intuitive eating, I recommend that you look into it. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. And hopefully this story will not apply to you, because it is shitty. If you are going through this, I get it, and it's terrible and it's hard as fuck. But if you are going through it, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, please reach out to me. And until next Friday, have an awesome weekend. I know that was a heavy one today, but I really did want to share that. It's super important to me. So anyway, I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I'll talk to you next Friday.